Good morning. Welcome. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Monmouth County. My name is Marinelle Mukherjee, and my pronouns are she and her. I serve as Staff Resources, Vice President Staff Resources on the board, and I'm on the Worship Committee. And I do soup luncheons as well. Whoever you are, whomever you love, however you arrived at this beloved place, you are welcome here. Our mission is to create community, transform ourselves, and transform the world. This morning, we have two guests. We have guest speaker, Patricia Hennigan. She's been a member of a longtime UU and a member of the Princeton UU for 17 years. She's a candidate to UU ministry, pursuing a Master of Divinity degree at Drew University Theological School in Madison, New Jersey. And our guest musician is Evan Schwartzman. He's a pianist and a composer. He has given recitals as soloist and chamber musician throughout the New York metropolitan area. His work can be found on CGNJ Recordings, Smithsonian Folkways Recordings, and all the usual streaming services. I draw your attention to the backside of your order of service for announcements and service information for next week. For those on live stream and for video viewers, the order of service link is available to you in the YouTube service description box. After the service, refreshments will be served in the community room down the hall that way, and people of all ages are welcome to visit with one another. If you are new to us, feel free to join us at the welcome table. It has a big red cloth on it. We look forward to getting to know you better. Also, please put your devices on silent. And then please also check our website, uucmc.org, where you can sign up to get all the latest news of this congregation by email. Welcome again to this place of love and hope. Being a Unitarian means leaning into a non-creedal community that honors the inherent worth of every person, balances social action with spiritual grounding, and holds space for complex, conflicting truths without demanding easy certainties. The road to the present has been long and complex, full of people willing to stand up against the status quo, even at times risking their lives. It's a history of strong, independent people seeking the truth as they saw it. Today, we will hear about some of these important movements from Patricia Hennigan. So come, let us learn and let us worship together. Deb Lawrence is going to light our chalice. Carry this light with you, not in your hands, but in your words, in your invitations, in your willingness to begin. Thank you, Deb. If you're willing and able, please stand for the hymn number 121, We'll Build a Land. Today's story for all ages is called Enemy Pie. It was all good until Jeremy Ross moved into the neighborhood, right next door to my best friend, Stanley. I did not like Jeremy Ross. He laughed at me when he struck me out in a baseball game. He had a party on his trampoline, and I wasn't even invited. But my best friend Stanley was. Jeremy Ross was the one and only person on my enemy list. I never even had an enemy list until he moved into the neighborhood. But as soon as he came along, I needed one. I hung it up in my tree house where Jeremy Ross was not allowed to go. Dad understood stuff like this. He told me that when he was my age, he had enemies too, but he knew a way to get rid of them, and I asked him to tell me how. Tell you how? I'll show you how, he said. He pulled a really old recipe book off the kitchen shelf. Inside there was a worn-out scrap of paper with faded writing. Dad held it up and squinted at it. Yup, enemy pie, he said. You may be wondering exactly what enemy pie is. I was wondering too, but Dad said the recipe was so secret he couldn't even tell me. I decided it must be magic. I begged him to tell me something, anything. I will tell you this, he said. Enemy pie is the fastest known way to get rid of enemies. Now, of course, this got my mind working. What kinds of things, disgusting things, would I put into a pie for enemies? I brought Dad some weeds from the garden, but he just shook his head. I brought him earthworms and stones, but he didn't think we needed that. I gave him the gum I'd been chewing all day long. He gave it right back to me. I went out to play. I shot baskets until the ball got stuck on the roof. I threw a boomerang that never came back, and all the while I listened to the sounds of my dad, chopping and stirring and blending the ingredients of enemy pie. This could be a great summer after all. Enemy pie was going to be awful. I tried to imagine how horrible it must smell, or worse yet, what it would look like. But when I was in the backyard looking for ladybugs, I smelled something really, really, really good. As far as I could tell, it was coming from our kitchen. I was a bit confused. I went to ask Dad what was wrong. Enemy pie shouldn't smell this good, but Dad was smart. If enemy pie smelled bad, your enemy would never eat it, he said. I could tell he knew about making enemy pie. The buzzer rang, and Dad put on his oven mitts and pulled the pie out of the oven. It looked like plain old pie. It looked good enough to eat. I was catching on. But still, I wasn't really sure how enemy pie worked. What exactly did it do to enemies? Maybe it made their hair fall out, or their breath go stinky. Maybe it made bullies cry. I asked Dad, but he was no help. He wouldn't tell me a thing. But while the pie cooled, he filled me in on my part of the job. He said quietly, There's one part of enemy pie that I cannot do. In order for it to work, you need to spend the day with your enemy. Even worse, you have to be nice to him. It's not easy, but it's the only way that enemy pie can work. Are you sure you want to go through with this? Of course I was. It sounds horrible. It was scary, but it was worth a try. All I had to do was spend one day with Jeremy Ross. Then he'd be out of my hair for the rest of my life. I took my bike to his house. I knocked on the door. When Jeremy opened the door, he seemed surprised. He stood on the other side of the screen door and looked at me, waiting for me to say something. I was nervous. "Can you play?" I asked. He looked confused. "I'll go ask my mom," he said. He came back with his shoes in his hand. His mom walked around the corner to say hello. "You boys stay out of trouble," she said, smiling. We rode bikes for a while and then played on the trampoline. There were some water balloons that we threw at the girls in the neighborhood, but we missed. After lunch, Jeremy's mom made lunch and we ate, and after that we went over to my house. Jeremy knew how to throw a boomerang. He threw it and it came right back to him. I threw it and it went over my house into the backyard. When we climbed over the fence to find it, the first thing Jeremy saw was my tree house. My tree house was my tree house. I was the boss. If my sister wanted in, I didn't have to let her. If my dad wanted in, I didn't have to let him. And if Jeremy wanted in, "Can we go?" says Jeremy. I knew he was going to ask me that, but he was at the top. He was the top person, the only person on my enemy list, which is posted in his house. And enemies aren't allowed in my tree house. But he did teach me to throw a boomerang, and he did have me over for lunch, and he did let me play on his trampoline. He wasn't being a very good enemy. "Okay," I said, "but hold on first." I climbed up ahead of him and tore the enemy list off the wall and crumpled it up. I had a checkerboard and some cards in the treehouse, and we played games until my dad called us down for dinner. We pretended we didn't hear him. When he came out to get us, we tried to hide from him, but somehow he found us. Dad made macaroni and cheese for dinner, my favorite. It was Jeremy's favorite, too. Maybe Jeremy Ross wasn't so bad after all. I was beginning to think that maybe we should just forget about enemy pie. But sure enough, after dinner, Dad brought out the pie. I watched as he cut the pie into 8 thick slices. "Dad," I said, "it sure is nice having a new friend in the neighborhood." I was trying to get his attention and trying to tell him that Jeremy Ross was no longer my enemy. But Dad only smiled and nodded. I think he thought I was pretending. Dad dished up 3 plates side by side with big pieces of pie and giant scoops of ice cream. He passed one to me and one to Jeremy. "Wow," Jeremy said, "my dad never makes pies like this." It was at this point I panicked. I didn't want Jeremy to eat enemy pie. He was my friend. I couldn't let him do it. "Jeremy, don't eat it. It's bad pie. I think it's poisonous." Jeremy's fork stopped before reaching his mouth. He crumpled his eyebrows and looked at me funny. I felt relieved. I'd saved his life. I was a hero. If it's that bad, Jeremy asked, then why has your dad already eaten half of his piece? I turned to look at my dad. Sure enough, he was eating enemy pie. Good stuff, he mumbled through a mouthful, and that was all he said. I sat there watching them eat enemy pie for a few seconds, and then I started eating. Dad was laughing, Jeremy was happy eating, and neither of them was losing any hair. It seemed safe enough, so I took a tiny taste. Enemy pie was delicious. After dessert, Jeremy rode his bike home, but not before inviting me over to play in his trampoline in the morning. He said he'd teach me how to flip. As for enemy pie, I don't know how to make it. I still wonder if enemies really do hate it, or if their hair falls out, or their breath turns bad. But I don't know if I'll ever get an answer because I just lost my best enemy. Okay. All right. It's time to sing. I don't see children at the moment, but we'll sing anyway. For reading, I'm going to quote something from Howard Zinn. To be hopeful in bad times is not just foolishly romantic. It is based on the fact that human history is a history not only of cruelty, but also of compassion, sacrifice, courage, kindness. What we choose to emphasize in this complex history will determine our lives. If we see only the worst, it destroys our capacity to do something. If we remember those times and places, and there are so many, where people have behaved magnificently, this gives us the energy to act, and at least the possibility of sending this spinning top of a world in a different direction. And if we do act, in however a small way, we don't have to wait for some grand utopian future. The future is an infinite succession of presents. And to live now, as we think human beings should live, in defiance of all that is bad around us, is itself a marvelous victory. Every week in this congregation, we are provided with an opportunity to practice generosity. This is your invitation to contribute to the well-being of our congregation. For those of you present here in the meeting house, the plates will be passed by the ushers. Online, instructions are located in the service description box. You may join us this time of generosity via text, send your offering by mail, or charge your contribution online with a memo designating an amount to UUCMC. Please give generously.
Hello, everyone, both here in the room and online. It is good to be together, and I appreciate you having me here today. If you've been a Unitarian Universalist for a little while, you've probably heard the idea that we're heretics. It sounds dramatic, maybe a little dangerous, maybe even a little evil, depending on what kind of religious background you come from. And if you're new here, or you've not heard that before, well, welcome to Unitarian Universalism. But what does it actually mean to be a heretic? One early way of understanding heresy is that a heretic is someone who chooses. And that doesn't sound so bad, really, to choose, to say, I cannot simply accept what I've been handed, to ask whether it's true. It sounds exactly like who we are. But in the early church, that kind of choosing could be seen as dangerous. One was deemed a heretic for choosing a different doctrine, outside of the approved teaching of the church, a choice that threatened the unity of the community. And once Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire, the state became involved in enforcing religious truth. So to be a religious heretic was not only to be at odds with the church, it was to be at odds with the state. We can trace our philosophical and theological lineage back to the very earliest days of Christianity. We count some of the heretics as our lineage. When we talk about Unitarian Universalist history, we're not talking about a straight line from the early church to Poland, to Transylvania, to England, to Boston, to us. We are not the direct institutional descendants of every person I will mention today. We are not even, and this may surprise you, we are not the direct institutional inheritors of Transylvanian Unitarianism. But we do carry the same theological and philosophical flame. Our forebears chose reason, individual conscience, and a belief in a benevolent order to the universe. They often made those choices in the face of terrible consequences. We see in them a recurring pattern of courage, flawed, obstinate, and sometimes wrong, but dedicated and courageous. And I think we need that inspiration now, because we're living in a time when religion and state power are aligning. What can we learn from those Unitarians, Universalists, and Unitarian Universalists who came before us? Because they were not perfect. They were not because history guarantees that justice wins, it does not, but because their courage can inspire our own. I've been a Unitarian Universalist for 25 years. I committed my life to the service of Unitarian Universalism when I decided to attend seminary and begin the pursuit of ministry. And still, I did not know most of the history I'm going to tell you until I took a class in Unitarian Universalist history. I knew pieces of it, I knew names, but I did not see the pattern. And since every time I preach, I seem to share whatever I have most recently learned, you may consider this sermon your UU history requirement in the mini Master of Divinity degree that you are earning by indulging me. And despite all evidence to the contrary, this is not a history lesson. It's about what we bring forward. It's about what we can be proud of, what we need to be honest about, and where we might find strength for the work in front of us. Our theological story goes back further, but we're going to start with the Protestant Reformation, which challenged the authority of the Roman Catholic Church. Reformers like Martin Luther and John Calvin fought church corruption and argued for direct access to Scripture. But they did not reject the alliance between church and state as enforcer of religious truth. And along came the radical reformers. Those are our people. They pushed the logic of reform further. If Scripture could be read directly, then even inherited doctrines could be questioned. They questioned the very nature of Jesus as divine. They noticed that the Trinity is not named in the Bible. The people who questioned that were not called Unitarians at the time, they were called anti-Trinitarians. One of those radical reformers was Michael Servetus. Servetus was a Spanish theologian and physician who wrote a treatise called On the Errors of the Trinity. He pushed far beyond what either Catholic or Protestant authorities would allow. In one of those obstinate moments in our history, knowing that John Calvin had denounced him and had said that he wouldn't let him get away live if Servetus showed up in Geneva, Servetus decided to go to Geneva. Not just that, but he showed up at Calvin's church. Calvin had him arrested, true to his word, and he was subsequently burned at the stake. Servetus had the courage of his convictions. He reminds us that our efforts are not always successful, but his death helped provoke an outcry against that level of persecution. That same questioning spirit appeared elsewhere. In Poland, anti-Trinitarian Christians developed a community known as the Polish Brethren. I had never heard that term until I took UU history. They rejected the Trinity, emphasized scripture and reason, and some questioned violence and coercion. Queen Bonasforza brought the influence of the Italian Renaissance to the Polish court. She was also the mother of Isabella Jagiellon, whose name I'm probably not pronouncing correctly, who was the mother of King John Sigismund of Hungary. In a town called Raków in Poland, the Polish Brethren created a community. They had a printing press and an academy that attracted Protestants and Catholics from across Europe. But when their political protection disappeared, they were suppressed and expelled. In Transylvania, we see a different trajectory. In the 16th century, under John Sigismund, Transylvania became home to an early form of Unitarian Christianity. But before that, John Sigismund's mother, Isabella, governed as regent. And during her time, the Diet recognized the coexistence of Catholic and Lutheran worship, an early step toward the broader toleration that would follow. John Sigismund later established the Edict of Torda in 1568, declaring that preachers should be allowed to preach according to their own understanding and that no one should be persecuted because of religion. But when he died, political protection weakened. Unlike the Polish Brethren, who were exiled and erased, Transylvanian Unitarians survived, but at great cost through centuries of persecution. In England, religious dissenters faced a different version of the same struggle. England had an established church with the king as the head of it. To dissent from the Church of England affected your access to education, office holding, and social belonging. Joseph Priestley was an English Unitarian scientist and theologian. His religious views and support for political reform made him a target. His home and laboratory were attacked in the Birmingham riots of 1791. He eventually came to America. But American Unitarianism didn't start with Joseph Priestley. It emerged from New England Congregationalism, among churches shaped by Puritan Calvinism. Many early American Unitarians came to find that Calvinist vision of human depravity, inherited guilt, and eternal damnation morally and spiritually unbearable. They emphasized the benevolence of God, human moral capacity, reason, and spiritual growth. Enter William Ellery Channing. He argued for the dignity of human nature, our spiritual capacity. He believed we could grow in the likeness of a benevolent God. Then the Transcendentalists pushed further, emphasizing inward authority, intuition, conscience, and direct experience. Theodore Parker pushed even further. Parker spoke of the difference between the transient and the permanent in Christianity. The transient things were the doctrines, rituals, and institutions that change over time. The permanent thing was the deep religion of love to God and love to neighbor. This is a moment that's especially important in our story. Here we start to see change from what do I believe to what do my beliefs require of me in this world. At the end of the Selma to Montgomery Voting Rights March, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. famously said, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice." The thought comes from Theodore Parker, writing in the context of slavery. And I don't agree with that line, at least not with one way it's interpreted. It can make justice sound inevitable. If the arc bends by itself, then those of us with a little privilege can wait. But Parker was not waiting. He resisted the Fugitive Slave Act and assisted people escaping enslavement. So maybe a better way to think about the moral arc is not, don't worry, the arc is going to bend, The lesson is the ark bends when people would put their weight on it. And unfortunately, sometimes we think the work is done and we take our hands off the ark. And that's the part we have to be honest about. Our history is not pure. Parker, for all his abolition work, believed in white racial superiority. While some Unitarians were abolitionists, some valued order over liberation. Some could defend reason while remaining trapped in racism. In the 20th century, humanism strengthened our commitment to reason, science, ethics, democracy, and human responsibility. But reason is not value neutral. Some humanists also embraced eugenics, believing that science could determine whose lives and reproduction were desirable. Reason is an important part of our inheritance, but reason without love can become domination. And that's why universalism matters. Universalists rejected the doctrine of eternal hell. They refused to worship a God who would create human beings, knowing that many of them would suffer forever. They proclaimed a love larger than punishment and a grace larger than fear. And when Unitarianism and Universalism eventually merged in 1961, they brought together these streams, reason and love, conscience and hope, freedom and responsibility, imperfectly, but with hope. In 1965, when Reverend Martin Luther King called clergy to support voting rights in Selma, many Unitarian Universalists answered the call, including layperson Viola Liuzzo and Reverend James Reeb, both of whom were murdered. This is history we rightly remember with pride, but only a few years later came what UU historian Mark Morrison Reed calls the empowerment tragedy. Hundreds of African-American UUs walked out of the 1969 General Assembly after years of conflict over Black self-determination, power, money, and trust. It is one of the decisive missed opportunities in our history. It's important that we remember both the courage and the failures. Being oblivious to our failures does not make us stronger. We are the imperfect but capable vessels of an imperfect legacy. Today, our questions are not usually framed in the language of the Trinity or predestination or eternal hell, but big questions continue in our time, framed less around doctrine and more around justice. Whose lives are considered sacred? What happens when the state aligns itself with one religious vision and treats everyone outside that vision as suspect? How do we maintain courage when the vulnerable are made more vulnerable? When queer and trans people are targeted, when immigrants are dehumanized, when disabled people are treated as burdens, when women's bodies are controlled, when Black history is suppressed, when women's bodies are controlled, when voting rights are weakened, when poverty is moralized, when the earth is depleted for profit, when government aligned with Christian nationalism claims the authority to decide who belongs. We are living in the ongoing story of human power. The details have changed, the stakes are different, it's just a new chapter. Servetus, the Polish Brethren, the Transylvanians, the early Universalists, abolitionists, civil rights activists, they had no guarantee that their work would succeed. They did it anyway. The arc of the moral universe does not bend toward justice because we say it does. It bends when we choose, when we organize, when we risk comfort, when we tell the truth, when we don't give up. This is what our history offers us, not certainty, not perfection, not inevitability, courage. So yes, we are heretics because at our best we belong to a lineage of people who chose. And it is now our turn again. May we choose with humility, may we choose with courage, may we choose with love. Amen. Let us join in a time of meditation. Center yourself in this space in whatever way is comfortable for you. Close your eyes if you'd like, focus on your breath, or if you prefer, feel the ground or the seat beneath you. Be here in this space made holy by our presence. Think back upon your week. Run your mind and your heart over the things that happened. Look for the ways love showed up, big and small. Folks that let you make a left turn, someone's warmth in an interaction, a person going out of their way. Maybe someone did something extraordinary. When did you act from love this week? Run your mind and your heart over the ways, big and small. Were there times you felt separate from love? When you fell short of how you want to be in the world? Times of anger or fear or disrespect? Ask yourself, your God, your gods or goddesses in the world. Look forward now to a new day and a new week, attentive to the love you give and the love you receive. And a moment now for the meditations of your heart.